we're seeing obviously a very clear violation of the ceasefire agreement. It's been almost universally condemned, both in regard to the high civilian death toll, and the fact that Israel, tore up an agreement. Of course, the United States is an exception, and unfortunately, Trump has defended Israel leaving the agreement. And resuming the bombing. And this is a pattern we've seen before. Israel will agree to something. The United States will Israel then break it. United States will propose an alternative that is in Israel's favor, and the Arab side will say no, we want to have the original agreement, and the U.S. will blame the Arab side for not agreeing to change what they already agreed to. Again, this isn't new. I mean, I'm hard pressed actually to think of a single time that Israel has violated a ceasefire agreement, not just with Hamas, but with any Arab party, where the United States does not blame the Arabs. And we've seen this under both Republicans and Democrats. And again, this is not unique with Israel and Palestine. I mean, look at the wars in Central America, and the efforts at ceasefire peace negotiations there. And then look at Vietnam, the Paris Peace Agreement. The Q regime was violating it all over the place. And finally, the North Vietnam and the National Liberation Front had enough, and they engaged in an offensive. But to this day, the narrative in the United States was it was the communists, that broke the agreement. I mean, the United States has always absolved its allies and blamed the other side, regardless of the facts on the ground. Um, Now, as I've been saying in interviews with various media over the recent months, I was optimistic that the first phase of the ceasefire agreement would come through, but I doubted that phase two or three would ever happen, because in phase two, Israel was required to withdraw from its troops from Gaza. And we have seen how Israel has repeatedly, violated its disengagement agreements. Most recently, of course, Lebanon. With most recently, the one that was negotiated just a couple months ago, but we can see this in 1978, 1982 to 84, and elsewhere. And look at the West Bank, the White River, talks, and in 1998, and again, the Israel, violating that in the fall of 2000, and still not withdrawn from the territories they agreed to withdraw to. And the thing is, the United States has been the supposed guarantor of these agreements, and yet we refuse to uphold, not only refuse to force Israel to live up to its obligations, but the fact that we are the guarantor, we failed to live up to our obligation. And it's based on the assumption that allied governments can occupy, colonize, and even annex territories seized by military force. And the United States is the only country in the world that recognizes Israel's illegal annexation of the Golan Heights. And again, this wasn't just Trump, but Biden upheld that. Yeah, it's not just Israel either. I mean, the U.S. has recognized Morocco's illegal annexation of the entire nation of Western Sahara, which is a full member state of the African Union. Um, and again, this has really put us in a very bad spot in terms of challenging Russian aggression in Ukraine. And Biden was saying, oh, no country can expand its territory by force. No country can unilaterally change international boundaries. But in addition to Western Sahara and Western and the Golan, I mean, if you look at every so-called peace proposal towards around with the Palestine Authority in the West Bank, it's assumed that Israel could annex these huge swaths of these illegal settlements, even if it divides up the West Bank into a series of non-contiguous cantons. And then when the Palestinians, say, this isn't reasonable, we blame them as the reason there is no peace. And I want to underscore has not always been the case. In 1957, following Israel's first invasion of the Gaza Strip, President Eisenhower asked, quote, "Should a nation which attacks and occupies foreign territory in the face of United Nations disapproval be allowed to impose conditions on its own withdrawal?" His answer was no, and Israel was forced to withdraw within weeks. By contrast, Trump's answer, Biden's answer, like that of Obama, Bush, Clinton, and Reagan before him, the answer is yes. And this is why Israel remains in occupation of much of the land it conquered in 1967, has reconquered the Gaza Strip, continues to colonize East Jerusalem, the West Bank, and the Golan Heights with illegal settlements. And what's been very frustrating, particularly of late, is that the Democratic Party, which has quite correctly um, challenged Trump with his appeasement of Putin and his belief that Russia should be able to hold on to Ukrainian territory that illegally invaded and annexed. They're essentially, siding with Trump on this, and this is not because of popular pressure. Polls show that 86% of registered Democrats in the United States believe U.S. military aid to Israel should be conditional on ending the war crimes and withdrawing from the occupied territories. Majority of Americans overall, but 86% of Democrats. And yet, virtually the entire Democratic leadership, I'd say probably, 4 out of 5 Democrats in Congress continue to support um, unconditional U.S. military aid, despite breaking the ceasefire, despite the ongoing atrocities, genocide, um, despite the refusal to be willing to make peace, despite the very real possibility of wholesale ethnic cleansing of over 2 million Palestinians. Now, again, I want to emphasize that if you look at the history of U.S. foreign policy, this is not unique. Now, I don't want to, on the one hand, I don't want to downplay the role of the Zionist lobby. I mean, I've had talks canceled, I've been trolled on social media, I mean, I know, I fully acknowledge that the Zionist lobby has made it more difficult to challenge U.S. policy, to change U.S. policy, despite popular opinion. But um, this is not the first time, as I noted, the U.S. has supported foreign military occupation. I mentioned Western Sahara. Before that, you had Indonesia and East Timor. You had South Africa and Namibia, where we used our veto power to, block international actions on those occupations as well. But it's not even the first genocide. I mean, look at East Timor. 200,000 people, a third of that island state's population, was slaughtered by the Indonesians. I mean, look at the indigenous peoples in the highlands of Guatemala in the early 1980s. U.S. supported the genocide there. Look at Bangladesh, 1971 when the United States sided with Pakistan. So, again, let's not see what the U.S. policy in supporting a renewal of the genocide in Gaza in isolation with U.S. imperialism elsewhere. And the lack of concern, not just about human rights, but some of the most fundamental principles of international law, including the inadmissibility of expanding territory by force and genocide against an entire people. But one thing I want I want to end on this note of a little bit of hope, and that is the fact that what we've seen the past 18 months, indeed, particularly what we've been seeing in the past week, really has led to a fundamental shift in American perceptions of the conflict. There's been a dramatic shift in public opinion, not just on military aid to Israel, but on whose side we should be on in the first place. And this is particularly strong generationally. I've seen I mean, my students, I mean, it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming. I mean, um, I mean, when I first started teaching Middle East politics back in the 1980s, I had to bend over backwards to tell the Palestinian narrative, because I assume most of my students, and assume correctly, they were familiar with the Israeli narrative and were sympathetic to it. Now, if anything, I have to do a little bit in the other direction because they're so hardcore pro-Palestinian now. I mean, it's just remarkable. Haven't seen any issue, including gay and lesbian rights, trans rights, that kind of thing, where there's such a straight line between public opinion and age. The other thing that, though, is, I think, and for among a lot of people, liberals and even many who identified as leftist, that while they were appalled at many of Israelis' policies, they opposed the settlements and occupation, they still subscribe to what used to be called the left Zionist narrative. That Israeli policies may be wrong, but still, that Israel has a right to exist, the national homeland for Jews, national liberation struggle for an oppressed people, and yeah, like other nationalist movements, they've done some nasty things in the process, but give them some slack and that kind of thing. But but we've seen that is largely disappearing. That the lines have been drawn a lot more clearly. And again, I think that has a lot to do with the generational shift, because this is the generation that's come of age with Black Lives Matter, with greater consciousness about indigenous rights. And if you look at Israel-Palestine from perspective of racism and colonial settlerism, it's pretty, I guess, a lot clearer, about what it's about. And, so I do see, there will be change, there will be more challenges within U.S. policy, but frankly, it's going to be a while, unfortunately, until this younger generation is in charge. And frankly, as some of you may recognize, here in the United States, we're fighting just to save our own democracy. We're fighting just to resist authoritarianism. At home, we're fighting to resist the most overtly racist administration in office for nearly a century. So my big fear is that our hands are very full right now. And for some people, even people who are very sympathetic, there might not be the time and space and energy to fight for the Palestinians on the degree that we saw, last spring and earlier during the Biden's time in office.